Hi everybody, welcome to The Edge Confidential. I'm here with Anthony from Banyan Treatment Centers. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You traveled far to be out here.
I did, almost 7-hour flight.
You came from Florida, right?
I did.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for everybody out there to hear your story and what you're passionate about. You bring faith to the table. You bring it into recovery. You bring it into people's lives. You're in recovery yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What was that journey like, and how did you find your faith?
That's great. It's a great question. I grew up Catholic in the Northeast, never really bought into any of it. I was kind of a CEO Christian most of my life, Christmas, Easter only.
Okay.
Right? And that was it. You know, like most people, and I didn't even really want to go then, but so there was a lot of guilt in that. So I was out in California, like I was saying, I was director of loss prevention at a young age, hit like the top level, and things were going really, really well from a worldly perspective and financial perspective. And then everything just kind of collapsed around the end of 2004, 2005. So I moved out to Florida, and my sister and nephews were going to this church called Calvary Chapel. And again, I didn't know anything about that type of church or anything. It's non-denominational. It's like a mega church. And so I went. It was a 12:30 service, and they do this altar call at the end. And I walked up and I said a prayer and I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And the next night, I write about this in that book, I'm on the phone with this girl from California who I was dating, and it was 10:14. And I felt this peace come over me that I've never felt before. And all this anger and hatred, it was just like washed away. And the only thing I could attribute to was what I did the day before.
Wow.
And I was just like completely transformed. The next day I was changing some old lady's tire. I drove my nephew to Miami because he wanted to see somebody at a hospital at Jackson Memorial. Just things that I would have never done. And that's kind of how it started. I got really into the Bible and Bible studies and ministry, that type of thing. So,
was it the surrendering to that potentially opened you up to that? I know people surrender when they get into recovery, right? They surrender, they get into AA or whatever it may look like for them. But when you describe, going to this church and going up to the altar and doing that surrendering process, it allowed God to come into your life. I mean, could you feel that? I mean, what was that experience like?
It's surrendering our will to His will, basically. We say it in the Lord's Prayer, if you ever say it at the end of an AA meeting, if they still even say it. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Thy is God, it's your will be done. I was doing everything under my will, right? And my ways. And it was working for a while, but when it stopped working, that's when I was really looking for something else. So yeah, it is. It's a surrender. It's surrendering your will. It's trusting something higher. It's something that you don't even see. So I didn't know much about it. I didn't know a lot about theology or any of these types of things. The thing that I noticed the most, that later that day, it was a Sunday service, I went to this air show where they have all the planes, the military planes in Fort Lauderdale. It just happened to be that day, and I went. And I was doing the same things I've done for years. I was drinking, I was swearing, I was doing all the stuff that you do, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I felt this, what I've known now is it's a conviction. It was like, it wasn't a guilt or condemnation, it was a conviction. It was like, there's a better way. I couldn't wait to go home and read the Bible. I never read the Bible before. I didn't know really anything about it, right? I couldn't wait to go back to Calvary Chapel. I mean, I was like, it was like a magnet, like just drawing a piece of metal. And all the stuff that I used to do, I just didn't want any part of it anymore. So it was this radical transformation. That's basically what happened. It went on for about 9 months, and then it took a really bad turn. Like I went off track for 7 years. The addictions and everything really started after this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you eventually got sober. And what did that process look like for you?
Well, I had a horrible gambling addiction, right?
Okay.
And I had a lot of money from stock sales from the company in California. I lost a lot of money because I wasn't there anymore, and that always really bothered me because I could have made a lot more. You have to be there. You get vested with the company. That's the idea of stock options. So it's an incentive to be there and for the company to do well. And now I wasn't there anymore, so I left a lot of money on the table. But I had a lot. I moved to Florida. I got this gambling addiction, and it just went on and on and on, got worse and worse. And then I finally banned myself from the Seminole casinos. So you go in, if anybody's dealing with gambling, you do a self-barring notice, and you sign some things, and they take your picture. And if you walk in there, you could be arrested for trespassing, which I did try to walk in there. Luckily, they didn't arrest me for trespassing. I went into 3 different ones, and they kicked me out. So, which is good, because you're telling them to do that.
Yeah.
So we're resourceful, right? You know, I found a boat that went out of Fort Myers. I was living in Naples, Florida at the time, and I was on it like 3 or 4 nights a week. I was telling everybody I'm not drinking anymore, I'm not gambling. Some people bought into it, some not. But my sister found out, and I was living with her, and she was one of probably about 3 people that would even talk to me at this point. Like, this is 6.5 years into active addiction and all the stuff that goes with that. So she kicked me out. All my stuff was out on the driveway, and I had nowhere to go, and I had no one to call, right? And it's a pretty low place to be.
Yeah.
And I ended up in a shelter. It's called St. Matthew's House. And that was connected to a faith-based program, which is still there. It's called Justin's Place. And I hit that, rock bottom that everybody talks about. I was sleeping on the floor of a shelter with 30 or 40 guys in this big cafeteria. I didn't have a bed in there.
Wow.
I was getting attacked by bed bugs. I had to go to Naples Hospital twice. It was like a nightmare that just didn't end. And so, but I ended up going into the faith program after a couple of weeks of that. And that's where everything really started to change again. That's where I reconnected with God. That's where I was finally able to forgive the person and people that I had so much anger and resentment towards. Huge game changer.
And that's such a huge issue for so many people, is getting to that point of being able to forgive. You know, people say, I can't, there's no way, I'm never going to do this. And it holds them back and it keeps them sick for so long. How were you able to do that? I just cried out to God. It wasn't like a half-hearted prayer. It wasn't like there was no lower that I could go. And He'll do that. He'll allow things to happen in our lives for us to get to the point where we're flat on our back and all you could do is look up. And so I did that. There was actually a verse in the Bible. It's Romans 12:17. I remember reading it. It said, never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that people could see you're honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. Never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. And I was like, whoa, right? It really, really hit me. It was like one of those kind of light bulb moments. And I read it again. That's why I memorized it again and again. And I got it from the paper to here. Because it just was like this kind of eye-opener. And then I really started to pray and ask God to give me the ability to forgive. I cannot do it on my own. I don't want to do it most of the time. Even when I try, I can't do it. And He showed up in a way where He softened my heart and transformed my heart, where I was able to finally forgive a guy who's my ex-boss, who I despised. But that was the root of the whole problem. That was the core issue. That's what led into not sleeping for a month and a half, to depression, to anxiety, to addiction to gambling, benzos, alcohol, nightmare, misery. It all went back to that one issue, was unforgiveness. And I think it's so important to be able to get to that point, to be able to recognize that, because so many times people don't know, okay, where did this start? How do you make sure it doesn't happen again? What are those signs, those triggers, those red flags, those situations to be careful of? So the Bible's a big book, right? There's lots of verses in it. What has been a verse that, besides the one you just said, that has really stuck with you and that you say on a regular basis?
It's a great question, and it's interesting because, like I said, I grew up Catholic in the Northeast. I didn't want to be there. I had to be an altar boy. My father used to make me go. I had to go to Catholic school, the whole thing. A lot of people go through this. There's hope. So at the end of the Mass, the priest would always say, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives to you. And the only reason I would like perk up when I heard that is because it was almost over. I mean, it's pretty sad, but that's the way I looked at it. You would shake somebody's hand around you, they'd give communion, and you'd leave. So I knew I had about 5 minutes left, right? It was like the countdown was on. Now, when I lost my peace of mind during the depression and anxiety, all the stuff I went through, all I wanted was peace, right? I didn't care about the worldly things, the money, the power, the titles, which I did back in the day, now meant nothing to me. I remember I could not sleep. I was just so enraged. I would lay on like cold tiles. I was so hot from anxiety and not sleeping. And I would hear the garbage men coming at like 5:30 in the morning. And my prayer was, please let me do that. Like, I don't care about titles and power and money anymore. Not that that's a bad job, but I was just like, I'll do anything, right? Just to have peace of mind. So that one verse, it's John 14:27. It's Jesus speaking, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives to you. It's a separate peace from him. It's called the peace that surpasses understanding. You're not going to get it from the world. You're not going to get it from power and money and titles and material things, right? And most people try to fill that void that we have. It's called a God-shaped hole with stuff. I did it for years. I would, you hit all these goals and these benchmarks and you're like, this is it? I still don't feel fulfilled. I still feel empty because God's not in it. You're filling it with all this stuff that can't fill it. It's like, trying to put a square peg into a round hole. It's always going to be there. So that's kind of how it happened. And that's the verse that always, there's other ones, but that one really stands out because it's such a contrast to when I used to hear it. Okay, I'm almost out of here too. It means everything to me. His peace. That. Yeah.
So praying. People have a hard time starting to pray. How do they do it? They feel uncomfortable. What did the process look like for you?
It's just a conversation with God, right? Sometimes we make it so much more complicated, right? And the Lord's Prayer, when they asked Jesus how to pray on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, where the majority of the 12-step program comes from the Sermon on the Mount in James. He said, pray in this manner, right? And he said, our Father who art in heaven. He goes through the whole thing. It's a blueprint of how to pray. It doesn't mean we just pray that prayer over and over and over again, right? So vain repetitions, he said. You think you'll be heard by your many words. It's not about the many words. I could be on Facebook and be praying that because I've said it so many times. I could be watching the news and saying that. So the key is complete transparency. It goes back to surrendering again, to trusting with all of our heart, right? Not just going to God when things are going bad, the foxhole prayers, right? Those types of things. He's looking for a relationship with his children, right? Sometimes he has to discipline his children just like a good father would, right? But he's a loving father and he has our best interests at heart. I always say read the Psalms. If people read the Bible, it's in the middle of the Bible. David wrote 75 of the 150. David was tormented. David made some really huge mistakes. David was being pursued by a lot of people. And he would just cry out from the heart. And you could just feel it when you read those. Model that. You don't have to say the same exact thing, but model how David connected with God at a really deep level. They weren't surface prayers. And sometimes we fall into that, surface prayers. It's even like in treatment, you get close with some people, really close. I still talk to some people that I was in treatment with in 2006. Why? You're spending a lot of time with them. You're confiding in them. You're starting to trust them. You're being completely transparent with some of them. Not everybody, but the ones that you are, you're tight. You've known them for a month and you feel like you've known them for 10 years, right? Model that vertically with God. He already knows everything that we're dealing with anyway. He already knows when we fall short. There's no reason not to go to him and say, God, I blew it yesterday. I totally blew it. I need your help with this anger. I need this help with this resentment, whatever it is. And he will. He will show up. But we have to ask. Ask and you shall receive, right? Which is also from the Sermon on the Mount. And it takes us to initiate with him. Ask, seek, knock, right? And he'll answer.
Ask, seek, knock.
That's it.
That's it. So when you're praying for somebody else.
I don't pray for anybody. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm like, what? What does that look like?
Well, it's called technically intercessory prayer. You're interceding for someone. If you ever go to sometimes church, they have people standing up there and pray for you. I just pray for somebody, like I was just saying yesterday, somebody, a staff member. That someone called me to have talked to them. They're going through a really tough time. And, you want to try to encourage the person and you want to try to encourage them to do that on their own too, right? Because we have access to God 24/7, right? We don't have to go to a priest and have them pray for us or a pastor or someone. We have access 24/7. So what we want to try to do is interrupt those patterns of thinking and replace them with things about God, right? We focus way too much on the problem than the solution.
Absolutely.
Right? And he's the solution. And he's where the peace is going to come from. And all of that stuff, the joy, the peace. And so, it sounds weird to people that maybe aren't into it, but I'm telling you, if you start to really get with him and really give him a chance, you're going to be amazed on what he could do. 7 years, I thought I was cursed. Everything I touched fell apart. It was a complete nightmare. And because I was operating here and his will was here. I was in unforgiveness and he's telling me to forgive. I blamed everybody around me, including God, but I had no leg to stand on because I was operating outside of his will. I was out of alignment spiritually. When I finally forgave, that's when everything started to fall into place. It's never going to be perfect, but the major things, the big things, have been absolutely incredible the last 8.5 years.
So what does it feel like internally to be aligned with your God in recovery?
It's amazing. It's just like you have a friend with you all the time, right? You have a father. You have someone who loves you and knows you, like, intimately, right? And it's difficult because in recovery, a lot of times we're wearing a mask. People wear masks, right? Robin Williams said this, and I thought it was amazing. He said, people don't fake being depressed, they fake being okay.
Absolutely.
Right? And this is a guy that was one of the funniest guys ever.
Right.
And he wore a mask. He didn't have anybody that he had an outlet that he could share. And it's so sad because he had to put on this performance all the time. So, we don't want to do that, like, spiritually, right? We don't want to wear a mask. We want to be complete. The transparency is huge in recovery. When you're completely transparent, you can have people that are going to be able to encourage you. They're going to be able to pray for you. They're going to be able to hold you accountable, right? And that's the part I never liked. That's why I was never really transparent. You don't have all this baggage. You don't have to worry about all these different things. What did I say to this person? Who do I owe this? It's just like a freedom, right? The truth will set you free.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the biggest parts of it. But the other thing, it's like an adventure. I just told the guy that's going to run this faith program in Palm Springs, get ready to be on a spiritual adventure. Because when the things that he does just blows my mind. It's really incredible. Like what I told you about even coming to Banyan.
Yeah.
That timing, his perfect timing.
And that's a perfect segue. And I love that, spiritual adventure. That's your next book that you write.
That's a good one.
Spiritual adventure.
Yeah, there you go.
So how did this come to be that you started at Banyan and you're now implementing Christian tracks or Christian programs within all the different locations across the country? So please walk us through that. I didn't realize how much of a big deal that was until I was on LinkedIn. Again, I should be getting paid by LinkedIn. I talk about them so much. I want to do a testimonial for LinkedIn. And that's how we connected. Yep.
So I, when you change your title, it just automatically goes out to like all your people on LinkedIn. And so I'm getting all these messages, not even just from the country, from other countries, things. They're like, this is absolutely amazing. Everybody in America, so many people are trying to eliminate God and take him out of the schools and take him off the courtroom, all the stuff that's happening here. And you guys are actually expanding him. And I must have gotten about 10 or 15 of those messages. And I was like, wow, this is pretty big. This is pretty amazing. I didn't even think about it like that. So, we expanded it on telehealth. We offer individual faith counseling via telehealth at our locations. There's 15 of them right now, 16 after May. And then when they have groups that they could go to online, right? These are at the other locations. Special events, we do Memorial Day, we do Good Friday, like stuff like that, Christmas. And then also alumni could be on there. So there's things that they could do at Banyan locations even if they're not at the program. Now the actual physical program where it initially started was in Pompano Beach. It's just north of Fort Lauderdale. We had one location and it was amazing because the owner of Banyan wanted it. And we're in the most beautiful suite, I think, out of all the Banyans. And he took that leap of faith to put us in there when we didn't even have that whole building initially. It was one location. It was actually a half a location because half of it was rented out. So he did that, and it's just been, I believe, these guys are great businessmen and stuff, but I said this when he did it. I go, watch what happens with Banyan. And we went from one location to now it's going to be 16 in May.
Spiritual adventure.
There it is, right? It's amazing. So that's kind of how it happened. 16. We're opening in Alaska next month.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah. So, it's just, there's so many things, but, there's a verse in the Bible in Galatians that says God will not be mocked, right? We reap what we sow. And I've seen so many times, it's not even the person's fault that's like at my level, it's maybe the owner of the companies or whatever. They get calls for faith-based programs and they don't have one. And they get frustrated because they're referring people that they could be there. And what they do, I think, is like, you know what, we just got 5 calls for faith programs the last couple of months. Get some Bibles in here. Get these guys to church. Yeah, we have a faith program. They put it on a website, and it's really not a faith program.
Not, yeah.
And they don't know who they're messing with, which is him. He's not going to be mocked, right? So what we do is we don't force it down people's throats. We meet people right where they're at on their spiritual journey, and some of them don't even have a spiritual journey. Not all of them are coming for this program. They're just transferring in from another program at Banyan. But we don't compromise biblical principles. And that's the key, because that's where you can really start running into problems. So that's how it's been. And it's coming up, it'll be 8 years in October that we've had this program. And like you said, we've expanded it to all the other, it's all levels of care, all Banyans nationwide.
And what have you seen it do in people's lives that have gone through the faith program?
Yeah, it's amazing. There's so many stories of it.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
We had a guy one time that was such an outspoken atheist. He used to debate in like universities.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He hated Christians. He hated God, everything about it. He even had a tattoo. It was like an atheist tattoo, right? That's how committed he was to it. Somehow he got in our program. He didn't want to be there. He kept trying to leave. He comes into my office one day. This is like 2 years ago. And he goes, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I don't even know why I'm up here. But every time I try to leave, something happens, right? Something gets his attention. And he goes, so I think I'm going to keep going with this. And he kept going with it. He did phenomenal. He got baptized. His father got baptized with him, who they hated each other, that they restored their relationship. And the crazy thing about it was he was so committed to being a follower of Jesus now and being a Christian. He kept the tattoo with the atheist thing, but he put a line through it and he put a cross right above it. And
it gives me goosebumps.
I didn't know if he was really going to do it, but he actually did. He showed it to me. He took a picture and stuff like that. I mean, we have people. We had a guy from NASA he was in the mental health program and he came in. Total scientist, total atheist, wanted nothing to do with this stuff. And he did phenomenal. And he wrote me an email from NASA saying how he's telling people about God and the impact that he had on their life and other people are believing. He goes to church with like other scientists from NASA. So you get these things and it's like, how could somebody's heart change like that? Well, that's what he does. He's in the transformation of heart business, right? And you see it over and over and over. Satanists, we had a 20-year Satanist. We'll get people coming out of some real dark stuff. And people are like, why the heck would they be in the faith program? Well, they know God's real. They know Jesus is real. And they're their only hope. So that's why they're there. They're just on the dark side of it. And this, another example, this guy did phenomenal. He came out of that occult activity and he's doing amazing. So you get genuine transformations of the heart in this program. And it's all him. It's not me. I don't have the capacity to change someone's heart. Either does the staff. We really don't have that much of staff. There's 2 therapists. But we can't change someone's heart. We're giving them, we're leading them, we're telling them, we're trying to encourage them. It's really him that's transforming them from the inside out. It's amazing.
What have you learned the most about yourself through the process of working with these people?
That just don't look at people as, problem people. Look at them as people with problems. Because the vast majority are good people. They're smart people. They have good hearts and everything. They're just in pain. They're just hurting. They're broken spiritually in every way you could think of. So as you know, you probably heard this, hurt people hurt people.
Absolutely.
Right? We always hear that because it's true. They're hurting people out of their own pain. And you throw alcohol and drugs in there, and now with your brain being impaired, you're really hurting people, right? Because you're tamping down the conscience, right? We're acting out of character. You're numbing all that. When they start to realize it, when they're sitting in rooms and all this stuff starts flooding back of what they did, right? They became a completely different person. It's not really who they are. And what I tell them is, and it seemed to work a lot, people say, if your parents aren't talking to you, if your family's distant from you, because they go through the pain too. And sometimes it's worse for the family and friends because they're not numbing the pain with alcohol or drugs. So they're going it with, and you hear, I'm waiting for the phone to ring. I haven't slept in weeks. I'm calling hospitals trying to find out where they are. I'm so worried. I can't, that type of thing. I don't know how to help them, right? And the person that's in active addiction thinks they're trying to hurt them, but the reality is they don't know how to help them. And so there's this disconnect. So I tell them, listen, say this, you have to take responsibility for the stuff you already did. Otherwise, they're just going to be like, here's another story. You talk to the person. We do this with family calls. I'll be sitting there. Hey, I'm sorry, and I take responsibility for all the hurt that I caused. But going forward, and it happened because my brain was impaired and the pain that I was in, right? Going forward, that's never going to happen again because my brain's not going to be impaired from alcohol or drugs, right? Doesn't mean they're never going to cause a problem anymore, but it's not going to be behind that. And that's been received really well. Hurt people. But you know what? Freed people, free people. Right? And that's what you're doing. That's what people are doing in this field. Right? God uses rescued people to help rescue people. He pulls us out of a ditch, and he doesn't want us to just be there and just, barely get through life. He wants to use us. And your experience, your testimony, my testimony, people that work in this field, they're going to listen to that more than someone that didn't go through it, right? And also it's going to provide hope because you're going to be like, wow, there might be a light at the end of this tunnel. This is a nightmare. It's been a disaster, but good could come out of that. God works all things together for good. That's the raw material that he uses, is all our bad choices and all the pain that we've gone through.
Perfectly said. So when you're having a tough day, something's going on, not all days are sunshine and rainbows and butterflies. How do you get through those tough days? What does that look like? Obviously you have your best friend here, but walk us through what that would look like for you to tap into your God.
Yeah, it's just, the Bible says take your thoughts captive. It really has a lot to do with redirecting your focus. When I'll give you an example. I was walking out of my apartment this was like last year, in my head, wasn't having a great day already, and I didn't even get to work because there was stuff that went on from the day before. And I look up, I got this beautiful view of like water and stuff. It's on the Intercoastal. And I have this amazing dog. He's a pit bull. He's our therapy dog at Van. He's the sweetest dog ever. And I look back and I see him in the window. He's got his tongue out. He's all smiling. And I'm like, and I start thinking while I'm walking to my car, I was in this sober house with like 16 guys in Connecticut. It was horrendous. It was right next to where I grew up. And I was running into people all the time. They're driving BMWs. They got these great families and supposedly this great life. And I'm like waiting for a bus to go to like the New Haven Green to basically just sit there all day. It was, so I compared where I was a couple of years back to the things I'm thinking right now. There's no comparison, right? So it's kind of like DBT, right? We had these guys that train on DBT. They were from Utah that came to Banyan the other day. It was a couple weeks ago. And I was talking to him, and I read a verse that's in the Bible that Paul wrote from prison. And it says, whatever is pure, whatever is noble, whatever is honorable, whatever is lovely, whatever is praiseworthy, think on those things. And I read it to him, like, that's like DBT. He goes, that is DBT. That's basically what it is. It's interrupting the pattern of negative thinking with all the stuff that's going on and replacing it and redirecting the focus on the good things. Highlight the good things of each day, minimize the negative things. And I used to do the exact opposite most of my life.
Me too. I used to do the opposite, and I was always the victim and looking for the negative, and now I do the exact same thing as you do. It's having that perspective of, okay, but look at where I'm at now. Look at all these amazing things that are going on. And I feel that if we can stay in that state of gratitude and be mindful of what we have and who we've become, those things that are happening, they don't really matter at that point, So, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So with this track, with Banyan Treatment Centers, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to learn more about what you guys are doing and what you're doing personally, how can people find you and how can people find the company?
Thanks. Well, Banyan, our faith program is faithinrecovery.com.
Okay.
So it's all one word, faithinrecovery.com.
Okay.
And then Banyan's banyancenters.com, right? So it's plural, banyancenters.com. And then I usually give out my number because if there's anybody that ever needs help or needs prayer, like this girl yesterday, 201-538-2754. And I'm not from New Jersey. That was just where our corporate office was when I worked in Manhattan. Because everybody said, he's like, you're from New Jersey? Not that there's anything wrong with it. 201-538-2754. And yeah, I mean, those are probably the best ways to connect. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, all those types of things. But just, connect and reach out, try to be transparent. Like you just said, try to redirect the focus. Don't get so caught up on the negative, especially with anger things. I'll just give you a real quick story.
Yeah,
I was just moving, right? Because they were knocking our building down. And I moved. And so they were supposed to send us our security deposit. And it's been like weeks and they haven't. And then I had this real nice frame that was sent to the old address. And I go there to get it and it's gone. So I'm thinking, we quickly go to the negative and stuff. Well, this guy must have took it. The guy that's still there, like the property manager, probably took it because he's the only one there. And I'm talking to him about him sending me my security deposit, and he's kind of like, he's probably not going to do it. So I'm starting to get angry, but rather than get in that state of mind, I took a step back, right? I tried to just not get upset and everything. And here's what happened. I put the wrong address, so they did send the security deposit, but I wrote the wrong address. And the frame, somebody picked up that lived there, and I got the frame.
Wow.
So see how, we could go off on this tangent, which I used to.
For sure.
Maybe said something really nasty to the guy. It just escalates when we get angry. Try to take a step back. I write a chapter in that book, what was my role in the conflict? How did I contribute to this conflict?
Right.
Because there's a lot of things maybe we could do different. The way we said things, the way we did things. You got to give yourself time to do that. If you just react, you're taking God out of it because he's not going to be able to do anything if you just react. Ego, edging God out, right? It's an acronym that could be used for that. And all of a sudden something's escalating when it didn't have to. And it's all over nothing, right?
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, everything you just said, edging God out. I mean, all of those things are just so accurate in everyday life, in everything we do.
Yeah.
Like all the principles, everything in our life. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Thanks for having me.
You are very special. I really appreciate you. Reach out, you guys. I feel like you have a lot of wisdom, suggestions for people, just to be there for people that are struggling, that need that help. Thank you for being that voice for so many people.
You too.
All right. Well, thanks, you guys. We will see you next time. Bye.